Thank you. Welcome back to our meeting today. Thank you. We now can move on to another roading matter, very important. We've got item 6.1, our bridge program, and an update from our roading and asset management staff associated with that, and moving the current report. I'm happy to move. And Councillor Fletcher second. Do we have staff who would like to speak to this item?
Through the chair, I don't know, Dawn, whether you'd like to just introduce the item and the work you've done. I know it's a good piece of work and a good piece of information for the infrastructure committee to get their minds around the condition of the bridge stock on the pond.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone, and everyone online as well. I am Dawn Spence. I'm the NTA Asset Strategy and Management Lead. So I coordinate all the assets and the works that go on with it. This paper today is to give an update on where we are with the bridges in the far north. In simple, we run our bridges programs now in different categories. We initially start with bridge inspections, and our bridge inspections are carried out every 2 years on the whole network, but there are key bridges which are also inspected annually for specific reasons. And I think we've said in our last one we did 71% of the network last year, and we will again then continue to do between 50 and 70% next year. We run scour protection programs, and that's a 3-year program. We run general bridge programs, which is a 3-year program. And we also then undertake bridge component replacements as well as bridge renewals. And attached to the paper was the 10-year list of the bridges, where we prioritise the most important bridges to do. And we work down that list with the budgets that are currently available. We also attached the present value end of life analysis. So this is the type of technical analysis that we use to support the funding justification from Wakakatahi. If there are any questions?
Thank you. I'm sure there'll be questions. I know because this is quite scary, really. Yep. I know Councillor Court is the seconder. If you'd like to commence, followed by Councillor Busick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This report, if anybody can see my agenda, is orange, yellow and pink highlighter and scribbled notes all over it. And for poor Dawn, I happened to bump into her at a cafe on the weekend. And I said, oh my God, Dawn, just read your report. I've got indigestion. I don't think I can eat my lunch. So we made it a big discussion point this morning as part of our roading portfolio meeting. And what I was thinking was that we develop a risk register and put this group through a risk lens, because I'm very concerned about the foreshadowed cost in a cost-constrained environment and the risk that may be posed to our users should anybody be on one of these bridges that are a risk of potentially catastrophic failure. I noted when I read the report that we'd applied for funding to do 4 bridges, we got funding for 2, and so that signaled to me that there was a bow wave coming. Glenn and Andy, you might like to comment on our portfolio meeting this morning and just fill in the gaps in my colleagues on the risk approach we started to discuss this morning.
Through the chair, happy to do that. We did have a discussion, a detailed discussion around this paper this morning. I think I'd give the public some and elected members the assurance that there is a robust bridge condition assessment programme. So I think Dawn, you mentioned every 2 years. Each bridge is inspected in terms of condition and an assessment made around its longevity and work that will be either maintenance work in your work or replacement. I think the significant risk that we would like to highlight is if, and I will use the word markedly, if the bridge stock is deteriorating, and we're thinking that that may well be the case in terms of the investment coming out of government and our ability to fund replacement, it will mean for the farmers greater restrictions on use, so weight and speed restrictions on bridges, and that will need to be carefully managed in terms of criticality and alternative routes, particularly as we head for logging and for communities. So there is a piece of work that the NTO has been commissioned to come back to us around the extent of risk for each of the bridges and what the effectively unfunded renewal and replacement programme looks like. So that will be coming forward to Infrastructure Committee in a future date.
Thank you, Andy. Councillor Youssef.
Yeah, thank you. I do think we definitely need a risk. If you look at the number of bridges we've got, not counting the large culverts, which they really are as well, that's 549. As you pointed out, for some time I've been saying, based on the life, if we say we've got 100 years life on those bridges, and if you look at them, I don't think we do, that we should be doing 5.5 a year, and we have been under it, and we haven't been doing that. So we're just putting off the evil day when this is coming to a fall, and unfortunately it's coming to a fall and now in the stressed economy. So look, 100% agree, we need to look at the risk, and we need to actually understand it, but we also need to how we can solve this problem with a sense, with a solid argument, because there's going to be an economic impact, a social impact, and probably health risk as well in many ways, not only with the bridge collapsing, but with getting access should that fail. Yeah, what more can I say about that? I think everybody knows that, but I'm very, very keen to get the detail, and maybe that's something that has to go to the heart. I do have a question though. In all the bridges you've got there, that list you've got, I got a complaint recently about Tahiti Bridge.
Sorry, which bridge?
Tahiti, so it goes over the Tahiti River. Someone was saying, is it on the list? And that's between Rawley and Kaiko here. We're logging trucks and everything are going over it. It actually is sinking in places.
And it's on State Highway.
It's on State Highway 12, yeah. So, and it's out of our jurisdiction, but the question is, because how many of these bridges, and I know I went over one main bridge on the State Highway, I know it's sort of slightly aside, sorry, but, and I'm thinking, what can we bring all of that in, because we're going to have a situation there where we need to actually present that in the argument as well. That bridge failed, for example, cuts off the again. Anyway, that's off topic. I'm just realising the complaint I had. But definitely let's go for risk assessment, and let's try and be smart about how we can do it along the lines of the roading.
Thank you, Councillor Youssef. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dawn, thank you for this report. And I don't have as much understanding of the roading, so when my indigestion occurred, I questioned whether or not I was reading it wrong, but the tone around the table tells me that that's not the case. So thank you for bringing this honest report to us. And just in terms of what the work stream that you said NTA were looking to do, and your comments around the possibility of looking at greater restrictions in the future in terms of weight and speed, is there anything proactive we can be doing in that space as opposed to being waiting for that assessment and being reactive? Are there any opportunities that we can do in that space to be proactive? That's my first question. And then, Madam Chair, I think a lot of the thoughts that were triggered with this for me were similar to the thoughts that I had when we knew that a lot of our active mode wasn't going to be funded, for example. And our response to that is we haven't had that centrally funded, therefore we can't deliver. I know that there is a centralised funding model review happening, probably not at the speed we need it to, and not in the way that we need it to. But I guess my question is more around whether or not we need to be having a really deep look at the way that we locally fund our transport. I think that at the moment we're just reactive to a system that we know is not great, but we're not doing anything to address that and make it work for us. So I'd be really keen to continue a conversation around how we might look to locally fund that isn't entirely responsive to the way that we centrally fund it. I hope that makes sense. But Andy, just back to my first question.
Through the chair, really good question, Councillor Smith. I think it is a challenge, and of course the piece of work that we're now building on the NTA will assist that. And it cuts to the core of probably a lot of the conversations we've had today is what is important to council in terms of infrastructure. And the first paper that we discussed today was around putting money in for maritime facilities. And of course, you could do that, but equally you could put that money as 100% local share into a bridge strengthening programme. At the moment, the NTA is framing their work around what is likely to attract subsidy from Waka Kotahi at 69%. So, you know, Waka Kotahi pay 69 cents out of every dollar spent, which is a significant saving to the ratepayer. If elected members feel that roading, and I've also put into the bucket 3 waters in part of that conversation, in water facilities, is more critical than some of the nice to have activities, then clearly we would welcome a steer from elected members that is the case. And of course the NTA could do a more proactive approach if there was a 100% funded budget, 100% local share for roading or alternative 3 waters in that space. So I think it's largely a political decision. We can do anything with sufficient funding. It's just where that sufficient funding is sourced from, and noting the affordability and rate rise discussion is the more we spend, the bigger the impact on rates and our communities. So I appreciate elected members have a bit of a balancing act to do in that space as well. But in terms of, yes, we can be more proactive, but we will need funding and increased local share to do that.
Thank you, Andy. Councillor Ford has a response.
I'd like to,
followed by Councillor Stratford.
And I sent my notes off to everybody this morning. So I have been lobbying for quite some time with the Minister of Transport for a review of the way the land transport task is funded in New Zealand. And I was granted an audience with Ministry of Transport last week, which I attended with Fraser Pierce from local government New Zealand. We were well received. They have been tasked by the Minister to look at changes to road user charges and fuel excise duties, shortened to ruck and fed, to prop up the land transport task in short term, why a consolidated funding review is being undertaken. They believe that consolidated funding review will take 10 years to complete. I expressed the view that we don't have 10 years where we're trying to manage an asset in an environment where we're facing cost increases of 30% and the National Land Transport Fund is declining, and we'll all be aware that the government had to step in this year and loan Waka Kotahi $2 billion to get them through the current land transport program, and that's a loan, they have to pay it back. So I advocated strongly, and I received a sympathetic ear, and whether it will actually land or not, I don't know, is that local government New Zealand, as the biggest player in the sector in terms of assets, not necessarily in terms of spend. Waka Kotahi, who manage the state highway network, may have a bigger spend, I don't know, but to give that some kind of perspective, there's 90,000 kilometres of network in New Zealand, and we, anyone remember my figure? I think it's no, I can't. Anyway, it's around 95% of that sits within our ballpark, and the rest is Waka Kotahi. So we've got the most skin in the game, but we're the last one to be brought to the table when any conversation's happening around the funding model. So that work is in train, and we'll just have to wait and see where that plays out. Fraser was going to take a proposal back to local government New Zealand to do a gaps analysis, which is what is being funded and what needs to be funded and what's the difference. The second part is I'm really reluctant to ask our ratepayers to pick up more than their fair share. we have 2,400 odd kilometres of network and 36,000 rating units. Our ratepayers are paying more per vehicle kilometre travelled than anyone else in New Zealand other than Southland. So we need to understand what the magnitude of the task is, who is responsible and who should pay before we go down any route that asks our ratepayers to dig deeper into their pockets. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. Councillor Stratford has a
Thank
question.
you. Thank you, Dawn, for this report. It's good to see that the work on the Kataia Awaroa Kahukatoa Road culvert replacements will be completed this year, and the Puhata Road Bridge, hopefully this June. I feel like I have deja vu, and it's not, I don't think anybody's fault in this room, that is staff, because in 2018 or 2019 we had a report on the risks to our roading network because of bridges. I can't find the report because I think it's buried in it as an attachment to some other report, but it reminded me, and I don't have any information in this report on the risks that we had in that highlighted in that report around the weights, and so hopefully you take all that into consideration when you're triaging which ones to be addressed. And just the last couple of bridges that I recall that have been addressed are Otawa and Kamba, and that's not many bridges in the last 5 years, so yay, we're getting another one done. Cool. Yeah, keep up the mahi, and just I think from an elected member point of view, we need to see this more frequently so that we can make sure it's a priority. Bridges are critical infrastructure. I don't see marine assets as critical infrastructure. I'd rather give $5 million to bridges than parking for boats. Kia ora.
Ngā mihi, Councillor Stratford. And thank you for your comments. I have one question before I'll just sum up with some dates according with the timeline. So my one question is just associated with the picture of all of the bridges that we have and the space that NTA is across all three councils.
Yes.
How does the Far North fare in comparison with Whangarei and Kaipara for our current bridge risk situation?
We prioritise Far North because we're aware that they have the most number of bridges that are the most critical. So they get the prime inspection spot so that we get the full picture of what's happening, and they get the first off the bat, and that's what we're doing at present.
Thank you, Dawn. I questioned Andy about the timeline for the risk paper about the bridges to come to council at the infrastructure committee. So that's penciled for July, August.
Okay, through the chair, if I may.
Andy?
I'm not trying to backtrack on this. With the NTA, as we have done with the unsealed roads, as we're doing with resilience works, other assets, we are trying to improve our, shall we say, our management of the data. We currently have our bridges managed through our RAM system, but it has limitations. So all our condition reports are attached documents. We are in the process of trying to get all that information into a separate system that we can use, that we can filter, that we can pick up and filter it on the risk rating. We can bring the figures up. And we are only looking at pulling that together about August, September. We are quite happy to work at doing a paper before that, but it will not be the final that we're trying to get to. So it may be a draft, if that is acceptable.
Thank you, Dawn. I'm sure that Andy will update me accordingly, and just on the timelines with the NTA and the presentation about the unsealed road network,
Yep.
The penciled timeline to get the 3-year program of works is September. So it seems like both of those timelines will coincide, which is exciting.
Yep.
We'll now move to the vote. We've had quite a good conversation. Thank you for all of your mahi, all of your work in that space, Dawn. So we've moved that, it's been seconded, all in favour? Aye. Thank you. We'll now move on to Hihi Wastewater Treatment Plant. Page 47. And do we have a mover for this item? Thank you. Councillor Stratford, seconder. Councillor Busich. Would you like to speak to the item, Mr. Mover?
Oh, yes, just quickly, disclaimer, when I read the report, I got rather confused, but just to confirm, the stuff in the coloured boxes is what we are going to do now. Right, Helen? You know,
So the stuff in the coloured boxes, sorry, through the chair, the stuff in the coloured boxes is the repairs that would be needed to the tank if we chose the repair option.
but this report is just an information report at this stage.
And we're suggesting that we don't do the repairs, that we'll go forward with the tank replacement.
And
But we've just included the information for transparency.
The replacement isn't until where was it?
Next financial year.
22-23.
Yeah. So we've included that in our annual plan workshop discussions.
Okay, thanks for that, Helen. So it's really great that the community have had their say on, community and Hapu have had engagement through this process, and but they've made a decision based on costs, and I'm not sure that they understand the risk of that tank like we do. Can you give me some comfort around that tank, Helen?
So through the chair, there was a further hui last Thursday, I think it was, 28th, whatever day that was, and both community and Hapu were there, and we talked through the risks. We did get a tank inspection. There was a tank inspection done in December at last, thankfully, and the risk on the tank, while it was still high, it hadn't moved into critical yet. But we were able to use the time last week to explain what the tank did. So it was a technical induction session to try and speak in very simple terms, which is easy for me because I'm no expert. To talk in really simple terms about that risk and what we needed to do. So we had the meeting in the fire station, which is just next door to the plant. So they were able to actually look through the vents and see the tank we were talking about, and also see the baffles that we've put up around the bottom of the fence line in case something horrific was to happen. So, so that was a really good exercise, and we got agreement with them last week that the tank replacement is the way to go, rather than spending money on repairs now and then have to replace later. So better spend of money is to, given it's still only high risk. I mean, that sounds terrible, but yeah, we're going to push it as far as we can. And so what they have asked for is for Andreas Kerman to be involved in a site visit and to review the tank replacement options report, just to give the Hapu and community groups comfort that we're not making a rash decision.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, you've answered everything that I needed to know. Thanks. I'm sorry I did not glean that from the report.
No, well, the meeting only happened last week, so the report was submitted quite some time before that.
Thank you very much for that, Helen. Awesome.
Thank you, Councillor Crickford. That was a really comprehensive overview, actually. Helen, I have to say you're a very good communicator. I don't know if it's being a woman, but that was a very good overview.
Thank you.
And we can now proceed to the vote. Is there any more commentary?
That was a very good overview, as you said.
So, Councillor Smith, and then we'll proceed to the vote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Unfortunately, I'm not in favour of the recommendation today, but as much as I'd like to sit here and say that I have an alternative to that, I don't. So I really just wanted to highlight, this report is an excellent reason why we should have gone district-wide on our waters infrastructure at our last LTP. We're going to see this over and over again, and effectively, by my understanding of the questions that I've asked prior to this meeting, by agreeing that we will go with the replace option, which I understand entirely why the community would go with that, we are also agreeing to non-compliance over and over again until that happens. And I think when you start looking at a bigger picture of our organisation, are we comfortable with non-compliance with our wastewater? Absolutely not, in my opinion. So I'm not comfortable with this option. gives the outcomes that we should be aspiring to for our organisation. But I do understand the affordability reasoning at our community level, which is why I don't have a solution today. But I will be raising this over and over again in terms of the district-wide rating of our Three Waters infrastructure. That's the reason that we're looking at a reform right now, and I look forward to hopefully having that conversation again at a council level. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. We'll now proceed to...
I'm sorry, I'm not happy leaving the terminology of non-compliance out in the air there. Is it possible for staff to speak to those comments, please?
Yes, I would love to speak to those comments.
Thanks.
Councillor Stratford. I'm with you on that one. The tank replacement that is proposed, please bear in mind that this plant is largely compliant. We have occasional non-compliances. They happen in the low flow summer periods when it's with intensification. Yes, we have a big issue with the tank, and the replacement of that tank with full baffle so that it is controlling both the influent and the effluent will increase our compliance beyond what we have today. So we may still have the odd non-compliance, so we're certainly not heading towards, we're certainly not trying to put in a non-compliant solution, and we're putting in a solution that can be part of the long-term solution. So what we're proposing for the tank replacement is something that is not wasted funds and not wasted compliance elements. That will be useful. It will be able to be utilised in the long-term solution, and we believe, based off the behaviour of the plant with the pretty much rubbish tank that we have there today, that we will be able to reach compliance, if not all the time. Yeah. Certainly considerably more than we are now, but we are only having the odd non-compliance, so please understand that.
Yep.
And a lot of that non-compliance is caused by heavy rainfall.
That certainly doesn't help us, that's right. So people have commented about wanting a larger capacity tank. We don't believe that's necessary, because part of our long-term solution is to actually reduce the infiltration and inundation that comes in from stormwater cross connections, and so that we will be reducing the volume of inflow into that whole plant.
Excellent. Thank you for giving that context. And for those online and the other lecture members here, Councillor Stratford has a background in this because she's the Three Waters portfolio holder, so she does take a strong interest in this. So we've had some great information and advice, and we'll now proceed to the vote. I'm in favour. In favour?
Aye.
Opposed? Noted. Councillor Smith. Thank you. Item 6.3, and I'm happy to move this. I'm very happy to see this on the agenda today, and we have Councillor Court, I think, begging to lead, and then Gardner. If we would have staff or Andy just to provide commentary to the capacity modelling update, and I note that we have our other general manager Darren in the room, who's responsible for the policy output with the information that Andy will provide his team. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just invite Helen to come and talk to us, if she would.
Do you want me to come up front? I should have just moved it up here. Okay, thank you. So it is exciting to be able to give this update and actually show some of the progress that we're making in this area. It's been a long time coming, trying to pull all the pieces together, because there is a lot of parts to the puzzle. A big part of what we've been doing is working with some of the groups in Darren's team in terms of bringing the planning groups together to make sure that we're all sort of on board with what we're looking at as well. So this capacity modelling's got lots of components, which is why the tables being prepared was included at the back of this report, because that capacity activity matrix, we needed to understand when the various parts of it were available so that we could actually pull the modelling update activity together. So we don't have a full timeline on when every plant will be done in terms of taking all these inputs and producing the information, but we do have stuff available now. So we have order of magnitude models available now that we can consider for when development questions come up. We can then overlay that with any of the other information that we have. So from the service area review, if a development is within or without that service area, what do we need to consider? We've got the demand forecasting. We've got new information, new population information. So all of those come into play. So as we, with the model updates that are being built under the DIA funded program, there are certain assumptions that are included because we haven't completed some of these activities. We've put a couple of people through the training on these model, on the code that the models are written in, so that they can update those assumptions when this information becomes available, so that they're no longer assumptions and they're actually our forecast data, which will help us provide that just more surety along the way. This will become BAU, ongoing work.
If I can just add to that, I think part of the annual plan workshops that elected members attend have clearly articulated that where we were at the start of the LTP process is not where we are now. Well, the world has changed through COVID, and what we're seeing is a lot of the growth forecasts that existed back in 2018 and 2019 are no longer valid. They've changed. We're seeing a migration out of urban centres to rural areas. And for instance, Kaitaia was forecast to have a decrease in population. That clearly hasn't happened, and Kaitaia is growing, as is a lot of our urban environments. So a lot of the assumptions that we were working to have changed. People are moving back into the region. That's not necessarily just being seen through additional residential units. It's also being seen through people moving back into existing premises where, for example, there were just 2 people living there, now 3, 4, 5 people, and that has demand issues in terms of our water and wastewater treatment plant, and is difficult to model in terms of the impact on our facilities. So it is a changed world. The world continues to change, and but this is the best position we're in, and we have been for a considerable period of time. So I would really commend the work that Helen's team have been doing around putting this piece of information together, because basically when I came 5 years ago, none of this existed. We, as a team, barely spoke to our colleagues in SP&P because they were planners and we were engineers, and we don't talk to each other. That culture has totally changed, and there is a great collaborative relationship between the teams that are working together to get the best outcome in terms of planning and engineering and infrastructure. So it's not, is it perfect? No. Is it finalised? No. But it's a work in progress, and it's a significant way forward, and we've moved a long way. So thank you.
Question.
Councillor Usage.
So I can see the work program you've got here. When will we get enough results to develop, identify and which of our schemes are going to hit their latent capacity or not be able to handle the projected growth?
So we have, so we are expecting the majority of the models will be complete. The actual network models will be complete in June, May, June. So we're starting to see some now. The stormwater modelling is largely complete and is being peer reviewed at the moment. The other models are rounding out. We actually did test the Kaitaia model with the request for Donald Road. And it actually produced exactly the information we wanted with the assumptions in there. And Kaitaia is a classic example, as Andy said, with the increased intensification of people, and also the assumption had always been in there that the tripod mill would close. So that's a massive difference in terms of flow. So we have prioritised the models, the network systems based on the current development need at the moment, and what the order of magnitude model is telling us in terms of capacity issues. So Kaitaia is right up there, Taipa is right up there, Kaikooi is right up there. So we are prioritising in those orders based off what we know today. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Court.
Thank you. Just clarification. I've read this sentence a number of times and I still don't know what it means.
Sure.
So the final paragraph, and I've got the paper copy, so it's page 52, where you talk about the order of magnitude is in large part expected to be superseded by the hydraulic model. What does that mean for the layperson?
Okay, so we've got a model that has been developed in-house that gives us some broad information about what the plant capacity is, what the network capacity is, what the discharge consent is, and we pull that together and work, and then we put against that the flow data that comes from the operations side of things, and then we use that to work out from an order of magnitude whether we've got capacity or not. The hydrology models that are being developed at the moment, the hydraulic modelling that is being developed at the moment, will take that to the next step and has a whole lot more elements in it. So the current order of magnitude models will largely go as we replace them with the network models with the greater level of information included in them. So the order of magnitude models are very simple.
An ancillary question to that, we know a number of our games have inflation issues.
Yes.
How do you factor that in? Do you have a margin of error for that?
So we allow for that because, and that's why the eye trackers are mentioned on the capacity activity matrix, because having that eye tracker information actually tells us about that infiltration and inundation. So that tells us where we've got issues. So in terms of the number of households and the volume of flow that we're getting through from that sector, whether that's normal for that environment or whether we need to go and do further testing. And it's like we're doing further testing with He for the smoke testing after what we saw on the eye trackers, because there's got to be some stuff coming through.
Thank you, Councillor Smith, and following that, I have a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Helen, for this report. My question relates to the district plan, and I asked my question prior to the meeting. So for the interest of my colleagues, I asked whether or not we had capacity in our systems to service the projected growth that will occur with changes to our district plan, being that governance have identified several times over that this we consider a significant risk to our district plan, and the notification of that. And the response was, as development activity may have to be managed in the short term while we plan the increases that come from the district plan changes. So my question is, how may we manage that? And how will we communicate that with the communities to ensure that our capacity work is complementing the notification of our district plan? Thank you.
So that comment comes from the fact that with some of those developments, while they're putting in for consenting and stuff now, they're not intending to be able to be fully connected and utilising the network for quite some time. So that's part of that, is understanding the time frame on each of those developments, so that understanding where we need to do it. The other part of it might be that it might be a reticulation piece of the network. And again, I'll use Donald Road as an example. Those reticulation pipes in that particular part of Kaitaia need some work to add, because effectively we'd be doubling the amount of flow that would come with that development put in place. So it might be a section of the network that needs to be addressed first, rather than the whole network or the plant or something else. So that's what we're talking about, managing those developments. So understanding where what the timing is, what the volume is that's required, which part of the network is impacted. Yeah.
Sorry, question, Madam Chair. Thank you for that, Helen. That's helpful. So I guess my next question is whether or not we are geared to be responsive to that, or whether that's going to be a situation of having to defer longer than desired because of funding situations.
I would expect that we should be able to. We've got a couple of IAF applications that are dealing with, specific developments that are happening, which will address the issues that those developments in particular will present. We have growth plans for Kiri Wastewater Treatment Plant, and as I've discussed in the annual plan workshops, that, come the end of this month through to August, we've got a series of workshops planned to actually consider all those issues and to make sure that we've got the activities noted that we need to do for capacity based off what we know today, and make sure that we've got that timing right.
One further question, sorry, Madam Chair. Thank you, Helen. Are there any plants that we're currently declining any connection to because they're at capacity?
No.
That's great, thank you.
Thank you, Helen. I had some questions, and I'm not sure if you can answer more, if it might be different departments, because my issues and questions, statements relate to across the different departments of councils. So first and foremost, how is council managing applications to connect, and where that comes into the application process for any land use or subdivision consents into Dean's department, so that we don't end up with any political issues at the end of the consenting process when they're reliant on applications to connect in order to have their subdivision for a 40 lot application.
You want to comment on that, or do you want me to? I'm happy to.
All right, have a go.
So that process is one that exists, and it's a standard and known process for applications for connections. The development engineering team is involved in the pre-meetings for consents for developments, so that knowledge is there. We have a development panel that considers, within IAM we have a development panel that considers those bigger developments that may need to have some different consideration given. So the development engineers look at all those applications, look at using the order of magnitude models and the other pieces of the puzzles that we have for that network or for that plant, and then they bring in, if there's any issues with accepting that, they bring that to the development panel so that we can make decisions about how do we resolve that and allow that to happen, or what do we need to input into a developer agreement, or those sorts of things. So there is a very well established process for those.
Thank you, Helen. So if I'm reading between the lines, applications will be rejected under Section 88 for Dean's department unless the application to connect and the development panel have approved those connections.
They may not come to the development panel if they're perfectly within the bounds of the process for connection applications. It might not come to that level if the answer is no one.
I think Helen's outlined this pretty well. We need to be careful, and a piece of work that I have asked Helen's team and my broader team to do is to look at what is the missing dollars around each of our wastewater and water plants to accommodate what we know is likely to happen. And this comes back to the common theme of today is around infrastructure costs and what that looks like. So there is that piece of work that we are building on. Certainly the district services team for larger developments encourages pre-development meetings where the infrastructure team work with them to discuss each application and the demand on the system for infrastructure, wastewater and water connections. And part of my concern is, whilst we still have some fundamental issues that Helen's explained that we're getting around addressing around infiltration and taking out capacity, I don't want to be in a situation of connecting up a new lot that basically causes flooding in the streets of Kaitaia or Kaikoui with raw sewage because a section of network has exceeded capacity. We know there are areas of the network that do surcharge. So I think it's a horses for courses type of question. We need to know what is being proposed and where. If it's in the current area of benefit or outside, we are talking around, while the conversation around development contribution is being held, then we are talking around development agreements. I'm also mindful that with Three Waters reforms, that a different type of contribution for development may be being considered, and that relates to a growth charge, which may be universal across Auckland, a base charge that is universal across Auckland and Northland with a local top-up depending on particular circumstances. So that's a debate that's underway for developers to contribute to the cost proportionate to the impact on the network. Alex, so that's still a piece of work that's underway. My guess is if there is a growth charge, it would be a reasonable charge for each additional residential unit that occurs.
Thank you, Andy. I don't know if you answered my question.
No,
But
probably
basically, I was wanting to ensure that Dean's department, the regulatory department, is not accepting subdivisions outside the area of benefit without it having the approved application to connect from the infrastructure department first and foremost.
Correct.
Because if a subdivision is impossible without being connected to sewage, it's outside the area of benefit, how is that a complete application under Section 88 of the Resource Management Act? So I want to flag that with your committee, Councillor Stratford. The two other matters that I had was flow assumptions within the models. I'm not sure how that works at a national level in terms of engineering standards, or how our flow assumptions that are put into the model are realistic or not. I wanted to flag that. I'm not an engineer, so you don't need to go into that with me.
They have been adopted as to what, it's not a national standard, but it has been a series of models, and I'm forgetting, I'm having a mental blank on which location is being used. But there was some models created about 10 years ago, and the process that is applied to that particular group of models is now being generally used across the board by our consultants, by all consultants nationally. So there is a flow, there is it's not an official standard, but there is a general agreement of how that is applied.
Thank you. And Councillor Smith has already raised my concerns about the district plan and its timelines, particularly not only with it being operative, but I know that the appeals will be looking at our modelling. I know that the appeals, particularly in Kirikiri, when we're looking at not changing the residential zoning based on infrastructure, and when we are solely looking at making it a discretionary activity, which means that we bring in the neighbours because of the lack of infrastructure information. I don't know this timeline and how that relates, because Kirikiri is a new wastewater treatment plant and a new system, so I'm not sure why we wouldn't have the information about that particular system at hand.
No, we do have it. Yeah, we do have it. We have information about all our plants and all our systems. Yeah.
So in terms of the district plan, we can say that it can be a controlled activity, cannot be declined within the urban area as per the National Policy Statement for Urban Development.
It's the drinking water.
You're losing your audience here, Councillor Foy.
I'm not sure that's, can we take that offline?
Yeah.
Yes, no, we can take that offline, but I will be bringing this up with Darren's team, and apologies if I'm using planning jargon, because
yeah, this is an information report, sorry, and yeah, so that can certainly inform your questions, and happy to take that discussion offline.
Apparently Darren's looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to them having the conversation, because this is probably raising really, really good points there. I'm just not making the connection.
Yeah.
I think Councillor Ford, to the chair, we have made time with you and the planning team to give you more time, because I appreciate how important this is.
thank you. Well, it's important for our township. It's not about any particular elected member. We've been waiting a long time for the district plan, and we need housing. So this is key, and the zoning allows for housing or not. So thank you for that. We'll need to push on, but that's been a really great first step.
It's been beyond the first step, but we're not at the end yet.
So we've moved and seconded, all in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried, thank you. So we are at item 6.4, which means that it's our monthly business report. It's a lengthy report, and I'm mindful of time. It's now 12 o'clock, and I'm happy to move with a seconder.
Happy to second.
Councillor Stratford. Do we have any short questions, or are you happy to circulate those at a later time to save time?
I just have one, Madam Chair, and it's the same one that I've been raising of late and aligns to conversations we've had this morning. I would be keen to see in this report growth pressure. So we are mindful that the elected members attended the presentation with Brad Olsen from Infometrics, and he talked about how the far north had a 69% upward trend in building consents against the New Zealand national average of 13%. We know the pressure Dr. Dean's team is under. What we don't know is where all this development is happening and the potential impact it has on the delivery of council services. So I'm just wondering if the report can be expanded to capture that.
Thank you, Councillor.
Through the chair, I will have a conversation with Dean Lyberg and see what we can put out to include in there.
Yeah, through the chair, we have had a report in our Compliance Committee agenda in the last year where it was divvied up. Just for reference, we can do it again.
Thank you, Councillor Stratford. There's quite a lot of information in this report. Did we have any other questions? If not, we can move on. Thank you for your comprehensive review. Did you have any further comments about the stuff in there?
In the interest of time, Madam Chair, I'll just move on. I think it's it does give a flavour of all the work going on within infrastructure, and I'm pleased to just announce that there is pushing time. There is a reformatting that's done that you will see next time. So my EA time has done a lot of work on it. Thank you.
Yes, I'm looking forward to the new report.
Thank you. So it's moved and seconded. All in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Any against? Carried. That moves us on to item 6.5. Just bring it up, 2, 3, 6.
I'm happy to move.
Thank you, Councillor Stratford. Seconder. Councillor Collard. And I note the author here, Helen. She's been busy today. Andy, would you like to speak to this, or Helen, or are you happy to take this as read?
I think, through the chair, I think it's an information report. It's just to provide elected members the feedback that's provided to the new regulator around drinking water. Helen, have you got anything else you'd like to add to that? Or you just have
No, not really. Louise is online if anybody does have any questions. She's actually the author of this report. It's just got my name on it because she did not have access to Info Council. So Louise Wilson, our compliance lead, is actually the author of this. So this is just a summary of the, as Andy said, it's an information report. It's a summary of the items that we responded to. I don't know if anyone's got any questions.
Just a comment that I note that it's a very technical, operational view on the standards, and yeah, it's great.
Thank you, and thank you for your work in this space, Louise. If you're online now, we can't see your face, but I'm glad that you know what a lot of these terminologies mean, because as Councillor Stratford alluded to, it's very technical. So we've had it moved and seconded. All in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Yeah. We're doing a lot better for time. So item 6.6 being the action sheet is next. And there's not that many actions, if I'm honest, on this sheet, considering the workload for the committee. We might need to update this accordingly, and but I'm happy to move the short report that's here, and Councillor Youssef second. Thank you. Andy, would you like to comment on why this report is so brief?
Through the chair, can I come back to you offline with that? I'll speak to governance and identify whether we've actually captured everything that's outstanding or not. I do agree, it does seem to be very short for the volume of work undertaken by the committee. So let me leave that one with me, please.
Thank you, Andy. So in saying that, if there's no further comments, we can proceed to the vote with this, and then we'll move into public exclusion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Thank you, carried. So we now move into public exclusion, and do we have a mover for that? Councillor Stratford and seconded by Councillor Youssef. All in favour? Aye. And for those online, we'll pause the live stream.
Can you quick,
We'll just confirm that.
Justa, could you confirm the live stream has paused?
Thank you. That brings us to the conclusion of our hui today, and we've had some great topics. I think my favourite, oh well, we can't choose favourites, can we? Can we, Andy? But I think it's been really positive for our infrastructure, and for Andy as our chair, thank you very much. And to Dolly, thank you very much for your help today. We really appreciate your assistance and being so helpful. We'll close with a karakia and proceed with our lunch for today. Ino tātou. Ngā mihi o te rā, ki te whānau I hui hui nei, I tau, I rangimari e, kia whakatapua tātou, me ngā mea I whakapono ana tātou, haumi e, hui e tāki e.
Thank you. Live streaming off.
Live streaming is off, Joshna.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank goodness I've got tomorrow off.